What's an important lesson you learned the hard way? 1,000 is not a lot of money to have, but is a lot of money to owe. Money doesn't exist until the deposit hits your bank account, and business promises mean nothing until legal documents are signed. Learn when to stop drinking and call it a night. Just because a person with authority tells you Toto something, doesn't mean it's the right thing. Toto. Dental care is expensive. Never be lazy with oral hygiene. Don't let love blind your eyes, red flags are real. It's possible to make no wrong moves and still lose. Never have kids with someone you don't want in your life forever. Stand up for yourself. If you get in the habit of letting people walk all over you, it'll be extremely difficult to reverse. Even if you're not confident, just fake it till you make it. Not everyone has the same heart as you do. You are not your emotions. You are an awareness who observes them. Your family doesn't always have your best interest at heart. Using substances to cope is actually the opposite of coping, and the only thing you can be sure of is the eventuality of everything blowing up in your face. 139 days sober. Wear a helmet. It's an easy safety precaution you can take when rollerblading, biking, skateboarding, scootering, etc. And it can literally save your life. Went all through the 90s thinking helmets were lame. Fell while rollerblading in my 30s and got a subdural hematoma. I wasn't going fast, but the momentum from how I fell just slammed my head into concrete. Helmets save lives. Do not spend like there's no tomorrow. Tomorrow will come and it won't be pretty. Sometimes bad things happen to good people. It happens, and it doesn't really need to have a reason. Sometimes you will be the bad guy, and sometimes you will be the good guy. It happens. Servers at restaurants. What's the strangest thing someone's asked for? We had a woman send a grilled chicken salad back because it was cold. So we cooked some new chicken and made sure to send it back while still warm. She sent it back again. The entire salad wasn't hot enough for her. We microwaved her salad. She ate it. I don't know, man. Honestly, I'd say the weirdest thing was that while I was a server at a restaurant in the Royal Hawaiian, a guest asked me to book a shark adventure tour. It had nothing to do with my job or even the hotel. Those tours were entirely separate businesses. I took his black card, went to guest services, picked up a pamphlet, and booked the tour. He tipped me $250. Totally worth it. Once a very thin, middle-aged woman came in. She couldn't have weighed more than 100 pounds soaking wet. She asked what our biggest steak was. I told her it was the 24 ounces, ribeye. She said, okay, I'll have that. Our steaks came with 2 sides, so I asked which ones she'd like. She said, I don't want sides. I told her they were included in the price, and she still refused them. I bring out her steak and she begins eating. She's about a third of the way through when I ask, how's everything? She says, great. Bring me another steak. I say, is there anything wrong with that one? She says, no, it's great. I want a second dome. I go back to the chef and tell him, and he couldn't believe it. But we served her another steak. She ate all 48 ounces of steak and left me a $40 tip. I had this couple come in with their own tea set. The man asked me if I had a few minutes to learn a few things. They were the second table sat, so I humored him. He showed me a very specific way of steeping and pouring the tea over a sugar cube and did me try it a couple times with water. The whole thing was sort of neat. He then asked if I would mind serving them their tea this very particular way. They were super kind, even tough. The man had sort of an intense vibe to him. I filled the pot with hot water, carried it out like he showed me, and poured their cups of tea exactly how he showed me. He seemed extra pleased but never said a word or even looked at me. It was no problem and I felt super fancy doing it. I did refill their tea one time while they were there, and he also asked that I keep his wife's water glass full at all times. I knew it was going to be a good table when the first time I came by and refilled her water glass and inquired if they needed any more tea. The man handed me $20 and sort of dismissed me. He did it twice more that afternoon. At the end they paid with no tip, I thought, but $60 and a cool lesson was enough for me. My manager found me about an hour later and handed me an envelope and said they told him they only will come in when I am working from now on. The envelope had $100, business card, and handwritten thank you note. Apparently they had put this request up for many fine dining places and I was the only to get it right and do it graciously. It was very odd, because after the first lesson they treated me as if I was almost invisible, backed up by the fact they didn't tip my person. On every return trip it was the same. If you didn't know the deal, they would seem like cold assholes, but they tipped really well and I treated them like VIPs every time. A tablecloth. A gentleman shat himself at a boot hand, asked for a tablecloth so he could walk out with it wrapped around him. I still serve him tot this day, and that was around 15 years ago. No shame. Back he comes once a week. We never asked about getting the tablecloth back. I used to work at a Japanese restaurant and I once had someone come up to me and ask me if we had Anilo sodium soy sauce. The request itself was not so strange and I gave him the bottle we kept behind the counter. The strange thing was what he used the soy sauce for, which was pouring some of it into his Pepsi. A middle-aged lady insisted she didn't like soda water or sparkling water, so instead asked for a white wine spritzer without the white wine. There are two ingredients to a white wine spritzer: white wine and soda water. Chicken is vegetarian. Lady orders pizza with chicken for the table. Rest the table argued with her that they're vegetarians. She can have chicken on her own pizza with chicken. She replied chicken is vegetarian. Refused to understand that her friends were trying to get a vegetarian meal. One time at a Mexican restaurant my brain glitched and I asked for chopsticks. Poor girl froze up and said, "I'll ask my manager, but I don't think we have those. Can I have the chicken salad please? But instead of corn I want peppers, instead of raisins, dates, and instead of pineapple, apple. Ah, and no chicken, thank you." I used to work at Olive Garden. There was a lady that would come in at least once a week and she was dubbed by us staff as Pepperoncini Lady. She would want you to open a new bag of the pepperoncinis we used in the salads and pour out the juice in a cup. She would literally straight up drink the juice. She would also get a bowl of pepperoncinis and just eat them. Not a server, but my grandma would bring in her own bread to restaurants and ask them to toast it as a side for her breakfast. Edit. I never really asked her about the bread. Booty believe it was some store-bought, multi-grain style of bread. She'd bring it in a Ziploc bag. It definitely wasn't an allergy thing and I don't think it was a saving money thing either. She wasn't the Great Depression type. She was a character straight out of Mad Men, Mrs. Maisel. She was never told no, but to be honest, she may have only done it at places she was a regular at. Typically when we visited my grandparents, we always went to the same restaurants. My clearest memory of her doing this is at a place we always had breakfast at the morning before we left. What is the one crime that could be considered worse than murder? Torturing people over years. Childhood rape by a trusted adult. Because it robs the child of their spirit and they have to live with it for their entire life. I speak from experience. According to those ads from the early 2000s, music piracy. 2 murders. Any sexual abuse to children. Anything sexual involving children. Pedophiles are the lowest scum on earth. Having acid poured over your face. No eyes, no nose, no lips and ears, and painful forever. Torture. How did you overcome your porn addiction? Serious. Am I only eating because I'm bored? Ask enough and it starts getting easier to talk yourself out of it. Also get more sleep. Not getting enough sleep puts you at a dopamine deficiency, which ups the odds that you'll need something in your day to make you feel good at all costs. Up the standards on porn. Immediately run out of good porn to watch. This ebook. It's short, so I'd recommend reading the whole thing, but I'll summarize the core message here. As I typed this, I realized it was getting longer than I anticipated, but bear with me, haha. The key to overcoming porn addiction is beginning with the right mindset. Often you'll read advice about how you need to tough it out, build your willpower, get a new hobby, do whatever it takes to avoid thinking about it or having time for it. That's not necessarily bad advice, but for many people it ends in failure because they're stuck in the mindset of porn is enjoyable, but I've got to quit, cut back. Suppose you start going for walks whenever you feel the urge to watch, but then one day it's horribly icy outside or you've sprained your ankle. You're sitting there, feeling bum-med because you can't go distract yourself, and the devil on your shoulder starts whispering about what you could do instead. Something will happen that assaults your willpower, and if that's all you've got going for you, unless you have very strong willpower, you'll fail. This is why you've got to get it absolutely clear in your mind what porn is. Put bluntly, it's a drug. It artificially spikes your hormones, over time leaving you numb to the milder stuff and sending you on endless searches for novelty. Fourth, perfect video. That's partially why modern porn pushes all this incest hit. They're constantly upping the ante with increasingly shocking content. It wastes your time and can interfere with your relationships. I recall a story of a guy whose small child was crying because of a thunderstorm, and he wouldn't let the kid come into his room to sit in his bed and feel safe because he was in the middle of watching porn. In extreme cases, it ruins one's ability to function normally. There are people out there who, even with a willing partner right there ready to go, cannot perform without ORN. Apologies for a little TMI, but this was my wake-up call that I had a problem. One night I couldn't sleep and figured I'd rub one out quick, didn't want to open my laptop or anything, but I found I couldn't get properly aroused without ORN. Thankfully this problem disappeared shortly after I ditched it. So to reiterate, you've got to get clear in your mind that ORN is brain poison that offers zero benefits and a multitude of drawbacks. But I'm really orny, prostate cancer bro. Then just masturbate or get over it. I'm bored. Okay? Ice getting bored a good excuse to start smoking crack. I'm gonna have X later and don't want to bust in 30 seconds. Crewing with your hormones and wasting energy isn't going to make you better ATEX. Communicate with your partner and get more practice. I want to make clear that I'm not approaching this from a moralistic standpoint. I'm not some Puritan crusader. I'm not religious, and I'm pretty in favor of people experimenting with theorsexuality as long as everyone's safe and consenting. I'm also not a nofapper. That's actually one area where I kind of disagree with the ebook. The author doesn't unequivocally endorse it, but he does mention some weird stuff about the supposed benefits of MN retention and whatnot. I don't really care if you masturbate. I tend to think it's best to keep it under control. Like don't get caught in a pattern where you cannot function normally without it. But what under control means for you is your business. All I'm saying is that nothing about ORN is helpful or necessary in having a fulfilling sex life in general. If you're struggling with it, I hope this information is helpful. I wasn't addicted, but I stopped watching ORN cold when one of my friends was flown out to California under the guise of a modeling opportunity photo shoot. She was then violently raped on film, forced to sign a contract stating she signed up for it afterwards, and handed a pittance for her troubles. The video of her being raped while crying and begging them to stop was on the internet for years and still surfaces regularly apparently. There's no real way to remove it completely. He took several other women telling the same exact story before any took her seriously. She eventually, along with several other women that the same exact thing happened to, sued for a large sum of money, which she promptly used up on drugs as a coping mechanism till the money was dried up. She then killed herself.